and thank you very much for us today. I am Marta Madawa from McDonough. I am one of the young professional members of the PIANC UK committee, and I've supported in the coordination of today's seminar on recreational traffic and commercial ports. I'd like to take this opportunity to encourage you all to join PIANC. You are aware that PIANC brings together the best international experts on issues relevant to waterborne transport infrastructure. There are plenty of benefits, but amongst them, as individuals or corporate members, PIANC gives us the opportunity to gain and share knowledge and experience through working groups or commissions. It also gives us free online access to technical information and guidance in the form of all published working group reports, such as today's 147. More importantly, you are part of a worldwide community of experts, so please don't hesitate to join PIANC. And finally, before Greg, the chairman of PIANC UK, introduces our guest on today's seminar, 2 announcements. The first one, we will have 2 presentations, and after that, we will go straight into the Q&A. So please feel free to post anytime during the presentations. You can type your questions in the Q&A panel you'll find on the right side. Please type it on the Q&A panel and not the chat. And both Elio and Miles have kindly agreed to share the presentations, and therefore they will be uploaded onto PIANC UK website after today's sessions. So now over to you, Greg.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and as Marta said, welcome to this 3rd monthly seminar of a series that PIANC is running in 2021. As Marta said, I'm chairman of PIANC in the UK and have been for the last 9 years. Today's subject is Working Group 147. Guidelines for managing the relationship between recreational navigation and commercial ports. I first became aware of this issue when I was about 9. I'd been taught to row at the age of 3, usually tied to the shore, but at the age of 9, I was set loose by my father to row around Foy Harbour in South Cornwall. And those of you who know Foy will know that it's used to export large quantities of China clay. In those days, 8,000-ton ships coming in ballast with their propellers thrashing around in the air, pulled by a very weak tug. The last thing they needed was a 9-year-old in a rowing boat getting in their way, and I remember my father being most forceful in telling me I had to keep out of the way of the big ships. So that was my first experience of how to manage the relationship. But at that point, I'd like to move on to introduce our first speaker. But just before I do so, repeat Marta's comment. Please use the Q&A and not the chat for your questions. And if you can, put what organization you are from. That would also make for a more interesting discussion. So let me introduce our first speaker today. We are very, very fortunate to have Dr. Elio Ciralli to speak to us. He was the chairman of the working group that prepared this report, and he's speaking to us today from Palermo, which is currently in a red zone as far as the virus is concerned. So he has our commiserations. Dr. Elio is a founder and chairman of a consulting engineering company, Envitec, Progetti e Opere. It's based in Palermo, and he has been with that company since he founded it in 1987. The firm has a large network of experts in different disciplines, from environmental surveys, architecture, engineering, and environmental specialists. And it's very active in the international world of sustainable infrastructure engineering. Dr. Elio has a degree, Dr. Cum Laude, in civil hydraulic engineering and is an expert in coastal engineering. He's been involved in the planning and the design of commercial, fishing and recreational ports, mainly in the Mediterranean area, and he's an expert in rehabilitation of waterfronts. He's also a well-respected marina designer. He has been nominated by the Italian Prime Minister and the Sicilian region president as an expert to participate in the High Council of Public Works in the Italian Ministry of Infrastructure. He's also very well known within the PIANC world. He was chairman of the RECREATIONAL Commission, RecCom, for 8 years. And he was also the president of the commission that yearly assigns the Marina Excellent Designer Jack Nicholls Award. He's been a reserve lieutenant in the Italian Navy, and we are very pleased to welcome you today, Dr. Elio.
Okay, thank you for the great presentation, Greg. Thank you to all of you for attending this webinar. And I have to thank very much PIANC UK and the Institution of Civil Engineers for having organized this occasion, this event, that I hope you will enjoy. Very, very interesting matter. So I will take some minutes of your time to explain which conclusion we have reached with this interesting working group. Some words about me were said by Greg, so I don't spend more time on this. Only I have to confirm that being part of PIANC is absolutely a very interesting opportunity and very interesting chance to meet interesting people in our world. So I encourage warmly to be part of PIANC as an important experience in life. PIANC was shortly presented. PIANC International works through 4 main technical committees, technical commissions. One is for maritime infrastructures, one for inland infrastructure, one recreation navigation. I had the honor to chair for several years, and one for environmental matters. If you join PIANC UK at the website or PIANC International at pianc.org, you will have a lot of information about the life, about opportunities, about the working groups that are organized with experts in our field. Let's go through this kind of work. This is one of the main duties of PIANC. One of the main duties is organize working groups on specific arguments, and the terms of reference are discussed before in the commissions, then approved by the PIANC International HQ, and then we will start the work of the working group. Normally, several experts from all over the world are engaged with this kind of activity. In this case, I have to thank, and I have had the honor to work with Esteban Biondi, that actually is, during this time, the new chairman of the RecCom, and Marco Corella from Spain, Kathleen Burnett from Belgium, Giambattista Boreadolmo from the Principality of Monaco, Jean-Michel Guernier from France, Jean Wong from China, Francisco Esteban Leffler was at time the PIANC MACOM chairman that discussed with the RecCom the terms of reference of this working group. Now Francisco is the president of PIANC International. And Fabiana Maccarini is a colleague, an Italian colleague that works in the United Arab Emirates from a lot of time. And I think he's a little bit more from that lens than Italian. Okay, for this kind of problems, we use to involve also the sister association of PIANC. So other association of experts all over the world that are involved in this kind of problems. And also for the case of the managing the relationships between recreational navigation and commercial ports, we asked the information and we make several communication with the correspondent members you see in this list. A special thanks we have to give to ICOMIA. ICOMIA is the International Council of Marine Industry Associations. It's present all over the world in many countries. And they reviewed the working group and they gave a contribution that you can find in the document, that I hope you will download from the PIANC international website. I prefer to start a counter of time because generally I'm a little bit long, so I will take a look at my phone for tell me when is the right time to finish. These are the main chapters of the report that I will present during the next slides. So the first phase was to understand which is the problem and why we need to go in deep in studying this kind of problem. And interesting things was said by Greg, because it's in experience of all of us, this kind of sometimes difficult relationships between boating and the rest of traffic, especially in port. And the structure we gave to the working group was explain which are the actors of these relationships. So the recreation navigation from one side and the rest of important port traffic from other side. After that, with colleagues of RecCom, the Maritime Commission of PIANC, we focused that one of the main issues for sure will be the interaction in navigation issues. So to understand which kind of problems, which kind of difficulties can rise from this kind of coexistence. But this is not the only problem of this kind of relationships, because aside the problems water side, we have the problems land side. And during the slides you will see, you will find that sometimes the problems on land are often very heavy and perhaps more important than the issues that you can find water sides. Which was the way to understand this kind of things? Before all, to study the accidents involving the recreational craft and commercial traffic for understand what happened water side, and then to study several cases presented by the members of the working group to understand what happens land side, to which kind of problems can happen land sides. We studied these cases to learn some lessons, and this was the basis to propose guidelines for planning this kind of coexistence. What happens is very easy to understand. All over the world, you have experience of this kind of presence of recreational boats, small, medium, large recreational boats, from small dinghies to maxi yachts, that are to share basins in port with other vessels. And this kind of problem is more and more important because you know that millions around the world are interested in recreation navigation, and these figures is much higher than the number of people engaged with the other kind of traffics. So you can find the recreational vessel in industrial ports, you can find in fishery ports, and you can find them also as normal in commercial port, as part of as completely different basins, completely dedicated to recreational traffics. So, as you perhaps have seen in the same symbol of PIANC at the center of the slide, PIANC synthesizes in its symbol the complexity of this kind of different navigation vessels that can interact each other. So this kind of very frequent presence of recreational vessel in ports gave the occasion to PIANC, a perfect occasion to PIANC, to study what really happened, because it's normal and it is typical of PIANC to focus this kind of general existent problems. One of the first aspects I want to present, because it's useful to understand one of the actors of these relationships, is to have clear ideas about what is recreation navigation infrastructure, what you call R&I today. The recreation navigation infrastructure is generally called marina, but very often we use to give the name marina only to few pontoons, few berths dedicated to recreational vessels. But nowadays the situation is more and more complex. So from several thousand of years, people go by sea with boat for tradition or for religion, for other, or simply to enjoy, to discover. And this kind of behavior remains until our days. So during the centuries, we can say now, because developing the activity of recreation boating was the exigence changed considerably all over the years. Nowadays, the recreation navigational infrastructure, the piece of recreation navigation infrastructure, in its most complex configuration, is an infrastructure that had to serve needing of boats and give services to boats, have to give services to people that goes with these boats, so the owners and their guests, and but not only, because nowadays it's absolutely clear that the recreation navigation infrastructure is a very important piece of the waterfront of our towns. So very often, and more important, the recreation navigation infrastructure have to serve and give services to people perhaps not interested to boats, not interested to going with the boats to discover sea, but only to enjoy a peaceful place in the waterfront. And this kind of new role of this kind of infrastructure gives more and more complexity to the matter. So we have to keep in mind also these aspects. It's absolutely clear that installing a few pontoons, floating pontoons, does not mean to have a perfectly suited marina or recreation navigation. Please see this picture, for instance, near a basin working of an important cruise ship. A couple of pontoons perhaps are not the best experience, are not the best occasion to have services for boaters. It's only a place where to park the boats without many services, perhaps. But as I said a few minutes ago, we have to think a little bit more a wider landscape of opportunities that in this case we have. Experience that we have all over the world, that before all the other things, people interested in occupying spaces in commercial port and fishery ports and people interested in boating have a completely different point of view. The first are there because they have the work day by day and they need to use the infrastructure for this kind of reason, the hard work. The other have to spend the time for leisure. So they have they need to have space very pleasant where to spend a nice time with their family, their friends, and as you can easily understand, this sometimes could cause some conflict. This sometimes could cause some a misunderstanding between this group of persons. So, in very few words, there were two main issues that the working group had to go for defining the report. The first about the navigation conflicts due to the mix of the navigation vessel in the same water space. And the other aspect was the landside aspect, occupation, conversion of pre-existing industrial, commercial, or fishing port to host recreational bird. So please keep in mind these two completely separate aspects to be investigated. Accidents, the first part of our study. How to understand, how to study this kind of problems that can happen, and how is important or frequent the occurrence of this kind of accident, especially in port areas. All over the world exists a lot of sources that collect and elaborate and reports data about maritime accidents. This is a list of the bodies that are involved in this matter in the European Union, but many others all over the world exist. And one common characteristics is that all this body does not use a standard system for collecting, elaborating, and reporting the data. So the working group had to study and to go through a lot of information, of statistical information about these main accidents and eventually casualties, trying to investigate how is possible to define a common meaning of these different statistics. For instance, the European Union has a specific organization, that is the European Maritime Safety Agency, and they are responsible in preparing and acting the European Marine Casualty Information Platform, where under a specific European directive, the Directive 2009/18/EC, the people and the nations, being part of the European Union, have to report about accidents. Like the other bodies, they give precise instruction about how to collect this data, about how to report this kind of data, and how to use this data for make statistics. I have immediately to say that the European Union use recreational navigation vessel accident in a big family called accidents of other ships. And some statistics can be interesting to understand what really happens about the possibility of accidents in ports. But the consideration we made on the basis of these statistics, in my slide, I promise I don't report about the complex statistics we had to study for the conclusion that I will report. But in the report you can find more pictures, more graphicals, and so on. But the conclusion of the European Union had this kind of accidents imports are sensibly lower than in midwater only in transit phase. Similar conclusion can be found in Italy. In our Ministry of Infrastructure, we have a specific office that is involved with this kind of statistics. And also the Italian body concluded that despite the much greater number of recreational vessels in confront of the other commercial and fishing vessels, there is not a great number of accidents that happens specifically in ports. In UK, you have a specific organization, is the MAIB, the Marine Accident Investigation Branch, that is a part of the UK Department of Transport. Here you can find, when you will receive my presentation, you will be able to go in deep with this kind of data if you desire. And also the MAIB concluded that on the information reported, leisure vessels and fishing vessels have the lowest incident rates in harbor areas, whereas commercial vessels had the highest rate of incidents. So also in a specific study that was conducted by MAIB from data, statistical data from 2005 to 2009, collecting information from 13 harbour authorities in UK, they concluded that there is not a specific much important occurrence of these accidents in port areas. USA, as in the Coast Guard, is safety division, and similar conclusions are concluded by USA bodies. Also in Australia, we studied the data from the state of Victoria and the state of New South Wales. I have to underline this kind of data, statistical data from the state of New South Wales, because very complete, very detailed statistics. So it's interesting also to understand how could be collected this kind of data and how they can be reported. But also in this case, appears that the very high incident of collision between recreational and commercial vessels happen out of the harbour area, not in harbour area. So we had a really important amount of data to try to understand if port harbour area is an hotspot under the point of view of accidents between the millions of recreational vessels that share space with big commercial ships of only with fishery vessels. And it's up to doubt that this kind of accidents happen. This is absolutely normal. But their frequency is not significantly different of a particular importance compared to others. This is one of the first findings in studying this kind of data. The effect justify investigative bodies that pay poor attention in specifically collecting with very focused attention to port area for this kind of accidents. This because for several reasons that I will explain in the next slides. Before, one of the main conclusions, because when they collect and make statistics of this kind of data, they explain which kind of accidents happened at which can be the causes. And the causes, you can be sure, are always a chain of events where the main cause is the human factor. So improper lockout, operator inattention, inexperience, the respect of rules, lack of judgment, or an excessive speed, and at last the use of alcohol and drugs are the main causes of this kind of accidents in ports. So is especially human causes. Why this can be justified? Because okay, we understand that is not a special hotspot, the harbor area for this kind of accident, and perhaps there are some reasons. So our working groups had the opinion that it depends from the fact that maritime authorities are very active, present in ports with special rules, with special attention in controlling of what happens in port area under the aspect of navigation issues. Very often we have, especially in port authorities area, the situation that the spaces are completely separated between different traffics, and though this tends to lower more and more this kind of problems. At the end, the fact that maneuvering of entering or exiting ports is the moment of maximum attention. So you leave one of the most important causes in the chain events, the human factor, because exactly in port there is the moment of the maximum attention during this kind of operation. So perhaps the first suggestion that come immediately from the analysis of accident data is that we have to boost the education in navigation rules and to have more and more experience to avoid particular problems. Case studies. The case studies were presented to understand how we can learn from what happens all over the world. The case studies were presented in a specific form from the members of the working group and were to permit a very easy confronting of different cases to facilitate the work to understand the lesson learned, were presented this case with a sheet distributed in description, strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats, and conclusion. As you easily understand, this is the typical format of a typical SWOT analysis that speed up our work in understanding the meaning of this data. I will present only few of these case studies. You will find more in the report. And one of these was the case study presented by Giambattista Borea-Dolmo, that is the director of the ports of Monaco, one of the places where we can say the recreation navigation infrastructure was born. And he discussed in a very interesting way of developing the recreation navigation traffic in Europe and which kind of problems, especially with the local fishery groups, happened during the years. After that, an interesting case study presented about the coexistence of recreation navigation basin with the fishery port was presented by Jean-Michel Gagnet. He is the director of Port d'Ormeaux in Brittany, France, and it was really interesting to understand which kind of problems happens between the two groups and how social attention towards this kind of coexistence sometimes can prefer one part on the others on the basis of the strength, economical strength and social strength of the group to be observed. Esteban Biondi discussed about Puerto Los Cabos in Mexico. This was a very interesting case because it was a case about how can coexist different salts in the same basin, finding opportunity to having good relationships and to work well together. This is so another aspect. After conflicts with the local community, you can find a boost, you can find an occasion to have more and more occasion to work together for such a project. You will find details in the report. I presented an interesting case in Marina di Carrara. Marina di Carrara is a port in Tuscany, in Italy, and is known because it's one of the most ancient places where stones, marbles were shipped in all the Mediterranean basin. This marble was used in ancient times for preparing statues. So the ancient statues from Greeks, from Romans, are built with the marble from this part of Tuscany that are called the Apuania Mountains. They have only one basin. They need to cope to resolve the conflict between completely different uses. So we had to design a new completely port master plan, discussing in detail the relationship between the completely different uses of the basin on port. In this moment, they had to ship big modules like small buildings that have to go to the Pacific area or South America because General Electric builds these big modules that you can find in the low picture on the left. And in the same time, they have fishery companies, they have recreation navigation boats and so on. So a very, very interesting case to be studied. The same in Port of Flanders in Belgium. Problems between recreation navigation that grows very quickly and the need of space to be taken to the local fishery community. Just in this case, the two communities engage important discussion, but engaged in important discussion because there is, in some times of the port, fisheries communities are losing jobs, and sometimes they're not economically interesting the activity, to prosecute the activity, to continuing the activity of fishery. But in this case, not the same. So growing up recreation navigation, it takes space. Some conflicts are generated to have more space in ports. Same things in Spain. This was an interesting case near Barcelona, the north of Barcelona, where recreation navigation could be an interesting occasion for giving new jobs, giving new life to communities that are losing economical power from the loss of jobs in fishery. Sanya Xiamen in China were presented by our colleague John Wong, and he presented a very interesting case because it's the typical way in which recreation navigation grow up in a port. Before few vessels that are berthed, that are moored near the fishery fleet, and then occasion make to find some equilibrium between the two existence. In this case, it was also a positive case of existence, despite the first moment of big conflicts. And like in the case of Mexico, the case study of Mexico, this was interesting to find how fishermen and the recreation navigation opportunity gives a new occasion of new jobs. At last, the last I will present now is the case of Mina Rashid. Mina Rashid is the most ancient, the most iconic commercial port in Dubai, United Emirates Union. And they are shifting the typical commercial traffic of this port like other important commercial ports that this important company that is called DB World owns all over the world. And they are changing the use of parts of some of the commercial port, especially in center of town, like this is, towards the recreational navigation activities. You will find in this red circle the first activity. It was the creation of a completely new basin for recreational navigation vessels, and they take space of commercial traffic, and more the sport in future will be used for a super and mega yacht fleet in next future. So these are the lessons that can be learned. It's normal that conflicts happens for the completely different use of the water and the completely different scopes of that people has to be import. At the first time, the recreational, the boaters, the yachtsmen are perceived like intruders. But if some occasion exists to boost economy, to improve economy, so things go in very easy way. And it's important to find opportunities for new jobs, for new business, and trying to having respect in local tradition, cultural and social heritage. Many of these case studies show always important the role of navigation, of the recreational navigation infrastructure. Please, Greg, if you think I'm too long, stop me without problems. I will go.
I think it is time, Elio, to bring your presentation towards a conclusion, please.
Okay, I will go to the conclusion. So how can be important to have win-win occasion between other things. I will go very quickly to the planning aspects, and the planning aspects are detailed described in the report. So you can find which kind of information are important for a good planning. One is to find win-win solution and to try to find potential synergies between different traffics, to try to estimate exactly the pros and cons of integration. Also, this kind of information you will find, and to try to understand the sources of the conflicts. Several planning reports, PIANC has, so for many plan issues, you will find answer in other PIANC reports. And I prefer to underline the importance of a correct zoning of the recreational navigation uses and the studying the port entrance and channels uses, so the protection from the ship wakes and the weather and climate consideration and so on. About the land side aspect, please keep in mind that it is very important to design a place that lives 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 12 months a year. It's very important to create a very pleasant place where to stay. And this is a way to find a win-win solution that can find people enjoying this kind of projects. The PPP opportunity is one of the way in which we can help our waterfront to be restored. And please don't forget sustainability and working with nature aspects. What this means, you can find in the report. You can find that having a recreational navigation infrastructure in port can be useful to boost environmental respect aspects and under several points of view. And so please don't forget what I said at in the first part of the presentation that a majority of accidents are dedicated owed to human errors. So we decide also to add chapters dedicated to behavior in port. So please download the final report. Only a curiosity, perhaps you asked the small picture. This is the case, a conflict between recreational navigation craft and a Europe traffic is the case of a very recent, couple of days ago, this important mega yacht that was transported along the narrow canals in Holland through the North Sea for trials. It's not a joke, this is true. Sometimes this ship had to be carried on channels wide only 60 centimeters more than the ship. Okay, I think that I finished now, perhaps some minutes more. So I will be happy to answer to your question, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elio, for that very interesting presentation. What appeared to start out as how do we manage this conflict, very rapidly you showed that to a certain extent the real source of accidents is not in the port but is at sea.
Yeah.
But you then quite rightly picked up on the issue that, like so much in life, it's a matter of understanding where the other people are coming from, so that you can understand what is annoying them and they can appreciate what is causing problems for you. And therefore this becomes a human management problem within a port, perhaps more so than a management of accident risk. So I think, yes, it's a fascinating subject. Thank you.